In this lesson, we're going to talk about 3D transforms. If you want to follow along, open up transform1.html from your working files folder, or if you're coming from the previous lesson, just go ahead and keep working with the same file. Now for this example, I'm leaving word wrap on. Although that'll make it a little bit less difficult to read in terms of the wrapping, we will be able to see everything all at once. If we take a look at the Mozilla Developer Network CSS Transform documentation page, you'll see that there are a number of things that we can do. As we covered in the previous movie, we can translate, we can scale, and we can rotate. But additionally, we have a number of other transformations we can do. One of them is matrix. Now, matrix is interesting because ultimately everything that we can do here is a matrix transformation of one type or another. I'm not going to get into matrix because in order to use it, you have to understand matrices to some extent, and it's beyond the scope of this course. But just know that you can do a number of different types of transformations beyond what are listed here. It just might require a little bit more work. So let's take a look at all of the 3D transformations here. The main one that we have is rotate. There's actually a rotate 3D down here. And there's a rotate X, Y, and Z. The X, Y, or Z refer to the axis around which we're going to rotate it. So we're going to play around with rotate Y. So if you imagine that this is a card and we stick a toothpick in the top of it, we're rotating it around the toothpick. For the moment, I'm actually going to override this just so we can see it on its own. Rotate Y 5 deg per degrees. You can see that the left edge has gotten bigger in our view and the right edge has gotten smaller. I can change it to 15 degrees. Or 45 degrees. And now I actually have 3D rotation happening in the browser. Now that's pretty cool. Beyond that, we also have translate Z. If I say 0 pixels, everything is exactly the way it normally would be. We've moved it 0 pixels toward the camera. But if I go into the WebKit inspector and start messing with this number, if I hold the up key, you'll notice when it gets really close, it zooms right by. Now, a lot of people try to emulate elements whizzing by the camera, I'm putting camera in air quotes here, by changing the scale. But if you do that in a linear fashion, you'll find that it doesn't work so well. What we're actually trying to do is we're trying to make the element fly toward the camera or away from the camera. So if we make it smaller and smaller and smaller, it should never go to 0. It should never become entirely invisible. That's where translate Z comes in instead of using scale. If you want to do this using scale, you need to deal with exponential graphs and all that, and that's not something we can do with just CSS. So just to review, the two that we've gone over so far are rotate Y and translate Z. You can also rotate in the X direction. Again, imagine that toothpick sticking in the side of the card. And then when you rotate the toothpick, the top of the card will either come towards you or away from you, and the bottom will do the opposite. Rotate 3D allows you to do multiple of these rotations in one line here. Now the other thing I want to go over is perspective. Now the specification is still changing a little bit, so this is a little bit fuzzy. If it doesn't work the first time, you might have to do a little bit of Googling to figure out how to make it work. But here's the concept. Here we have a box. This box div is inside the body. If we put WebKit perspective on the body and give it a value, what that does is it sets a relationship between things further away and things that are closer. If you're familiar with film, you might consider that focal length. Or if you've ever watched normal YouTube videos